What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to the House of Kayfabe. I am, of course, the other Steve, and I am here with the best damn indie ring announcer in the business, Adam Harris. What's happening?
What up, everybody?
I am also here with the trial chief, a man who is so famous his home state named a river after him. We have Stephen P. New, Esquire.
What's up, everybody?
So this video was my idea, and I knew I needed to have Adam here because he is the best of us. He has the strongest moral center. Steve New, morals, I'll send you the definition. He's a lawyer.
They removed those along with my soul in law school.
A moral plasty, if you will.
Yes.
And Adam, I wanted to start with you with this subject. Of course, it's the name of the video. Because you are, shoot, legitimately the nicest guy that I know. And I know that we as wrestling fans, we love salacious details. We love the shoot of the story. The first couple of seasons of Dark Side of the Ring were essential viewing. I guess they all are because, and actually on Vice TV, it is the #1 rated show, and it has, and I'm not sure if the wrestler or the wrestlers with Damian Abraham preceded it, but I also know now that they've even moved into WOW. They have Women of Wrestling on Vice TV now. Vice TV has become a platform for wrestling content. Adam Harris, these episodes, we've found that some of our heroes weren't the heroes that we thought they were. We found about dark secrets, and it's all depressive. Adam Harris, as someone who sees the good in everything, do you think that Dark Side of the Ring is bad for wrestling as a whole?
Well, I appreciate you donning me the excellence of optimism here in the House of Kayfabe, and I can say all the good things possible about Dark Side of the Ring. Is it good for wrestling in general? And I think when you talk about that, you're thinking about, is it good for wrestling in the overall public eye, in the court of public appeal? And it definitely does not do us any favors as wrestling fans. And I think, are there any casual fans watching this? I don't think so. I mean, if you maybe a wife or two here or there, but I'll tell you one thing, my wife, who's a very casual viewer, pretty disgusted by some of the things she's seen on Dark Side of the Ring, when it comes to the Grizzly Smith. She didn't like Beyond the Mat with Jake the Snake Roberts either, like watching that whole thing break down. Doesn't like the voyeurism of watching some people suffer through very real struggles. And I think we as wrestling fans are starving for this kind of stuff because in this day and age, we've found out everything we think there is to find out about things like XPW or about Macho Man and Liz or Owen Hart. But yet everything, and the one thing they're great at is Dark Side of the Ring has pulled up things that we've not seen before here and there. And it may only be a short clip of Miss Elizabeth on ICW, or it may only be a short clip of an unseen New Jack from Smoky Mountain or something like that. But boy, every time one of those pops up on the screen, I get really excited, and that makes it all worth it to me, even though sometimes we're sitting through some pretty difficult content. Is it good for wrestling fans? Yes. Would I say to any general person that I'm trying to turn on to wrestling, you should go watch the Chris Benoit episode? Probably not.
And that's really my point. I want to go to you, Steve. I broke my wife in one afternoon during the pandemic when we were all locked in our room, in our houses, and all we could do is watch television. And I wasn't even thinking about it. My wife, the best way I put it is, I am married to Mrs. Rogers. If Mr. Rogers was a female, I'm married to her. And she's kind of like Adam, like super good, just good. And I gave her the Chris Benoit Von Erich duo back to back. She's in tears. She's begging me to turn this off. Now, for us fans, we can't get enough of this, Steve. Do you think, and I've posited on the videos, on other videos before, that I think that I'm afraid that we are on the downside of wrestling popularity. New fans aren't being made. And in that sense, do you think that Dark Side of the Ring, as much as we love it, how popular it is it bad? Is it bad for the popularity and to keep this art form that we love going?
I don't think Dark Side of the Ring is bad for pro wrestling. And let me tell you the reason why. I believe that there is a certain subset of people out there who love murder mysteries, who love legal documentaries, if you will. There's a reason why the Alec Murdaugh trial, about the trial lawyer in South Carolina who killed his wife and his son, drew huge ratings, huge podcast ratings. I mean, there were people addicted to that story, couldn't get enough, who don't follow legal stories, the big cases that are reported on in the legal journals that I read every day, but they loved the sensationalism of the Alec Murdaugh trial. So I believe that person isn't going to be turned off by Chris Benoit, the Von Erichs, or Grizzly Smith. And for wrestling fans, as Adam was saying, it's pulling the curtain back just a little bit more. I mean, a lot of us have read the wrestling biographies and autobiographies, and we think that we know a lot, you know, but you can read the Andre the Giant book, but it's like these guys at Vice, Evan Husney and those guys have a way of getting access to some film or a firsthand account from another wrestler. And those are personally my favorite parts of the Dark Side of the Ring. And they can always deliver in every episode a nugget or two that you had never heard before, no matter how many shoot videos you'd watched or whatever else. And you think that you knew a certain subject, boom, here comes something.
I think Steve makes a great point that this might be more relatable as a television product to an average viewer who's used to watching crime dramas or unsolved mystery type deals. You know, that Dino Bravo story, like that guy was smuggling illegal cigarettes from Canada, you know, I mean, like,
right.
Talk about, you know, relatable as far as television goes. Like that's and I think we're learning those sort of things about the people we kind of only knew as television characters. And that's another thing that I think is appealing to us, again, as wrestling fans, maybe not the general public, finding out more about Dino Bravo and Brian Pillman and Chris Candido in this most recent episode.
Yeah, Dino Bravo was hooked up with the Italian mob, you know, and what you figure out too is that these people have family members who love them. You know, we remember Dino Bravo, and I remember reading about him in the aftermags as this Canadian superstar. You know, he was beloved in Canada. He comes into WWF during the steroid era, and you can see, man, he just balloons up. He almost can't move when he's being managed by Jimmy Hart. And then not long after that, there he is smuggling cigarettes across the American-Canadian border, and he ends up shot in his apartment one night. You know, but I loved seeing that he had a family who loved him, you know, and that there were a whole lot more sides to that guy.
Well, the star
previously known.
The star of the Chris Benoit episode was who was the woman that his son eventually reconnected with at the end?
That was Nancy's sister.
Okay, so that was okay. And the reason why I thought of this is because the last episode, and Steve, in our chat, which one day will be available for Patreon subscribers, highly redacted, you said that episode depressed you, and that's what I think maybe it's the juxtaposition of what has been a really great year of wrestling that has made us all feel really good. Like when Sami Zayn turned on Roman, that was one of the best feel good moments in all of wrestling. When Jimmy that turned on Roman and gave him the super kick? Am I getting this right?
The other night, yes.
Recently, you know, when that happened, but all these great feelings, and it's what I want from wrestling. You know, I work all the time, and when I get my entertainment, I want to feel good.
When Cody Rhodes won the Royal Rumble over Gunther, that was a great. We all ate that stuff up.
Mhm.
I want to feel good, Steve, and I want to take this to you. The Tammy and the Chris Candido episode bummed me the fuck out, and I felt bad. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, I love this business. I want to feel good when I'm watching wrestling.
Well, I think the reason why you feel so bad, you see a guy who's my age, right? Chris and Tammy graduated from high school together in 1990 in somewhere New Jersey. And Chris Candido loved pro wrestling as a kid, just like a lot of us did. He's making fake belts, right? He's living it.
Drawing.
He's on the trampoline in the backyard, and that's his dream. He drops out of college to go to Knoxville, Tennessee, and Jim Cornette admits he couldn't pay Candido. He couldn't pay him enough to justify moving from New Jersey to Knoxville, Tennessee, and boom, Tammy didn't even have any desires to be in the wrestling business. You know, Jimmy looks at her and says, "That's a pretty girl, and she can talk, and she's going to come across as this Hillary Clinton Northerner." And in East Tennessee and Eastern Kentucky and Southern West Virginia, that's not going to go over real well. That's over about as well as New Jack. And so, you know, they learned the business very quickly. You heard Chris's mom say, well, when he made the WWF, I thought he'd made it. But then, as this business so often does, it just chews people up sometimes. You know, it just chews people up. And long before WWE had a wellness policy or was offering to send people to rehab or anything like that, you know, if you were no longer of use to the WWF, you got fired, you got let go, and that was that. But that episode was depressing on multiple levels to me. One, Tammy's a former client, friend of mine. You know, I know her very well. And then, but I never knew Chris Candido. And when you see people like Dr. Tom crying and Mick Foley choked up and Cornette having to walk away from the camera, there's my friend that I talk to once or twice a week, Jim Cornette, and he's getting so choked up thinking about this. But I think Jimmy described it perfectly. He said, look, it's a story. It's a love story. It's a success story, and it's a cautionary tale. You know, it's all of those things wrapped into one. And in that story in particular, there is no happy ending. And you know, that's the beauty of pro wrestling. If you can script it the right way, if you can script pro wrestling the right way, like we hope is going on in the long-term storytelling of the bloodline, of Cody Rhodes and all of that, you hope that you get to the satisfying payoff at the end of it. And in a lot of these real life stories, man, there is no happy ending at the end of it. And so I think that's where real life and pro wrestling sometimes collide, is that you don't get the payoff. You don't get the good, happy ending. You know, regardless of what you think of the people, sometimes that just doesn't happen.
Well, you know, what you described is exactly why this is such a successful franchise. You know what I mean? And it's spawned Tales from the Territories. And Tales from the Territories didn't make me feel bad. There was some bad stories told, but for the most part, it was a bunch of stuff that I was like, wow, I didn't know that. That's fucking great. Jeff Jarrett knows how to tell a story. That's great. Sure. But, you know, at the end of this one, like you said, Steve, there was no happy ending. Adam Harris, I wanted to go immediately go watch Miss Elizabeth run in on Sherry and have that good
the reuniting of Macho and Liz.
That's
right.
something like get me out of
feel
this
good moment.
Get me out of this funk, Adam. What do you think?
Man, I was really looking forward to the Chris and Tammy story, and I am a Chris Candido fan. And one of the most street cred things about me as a wrestling fan is I went to a few Smoky Mountain shows in Beckley, West Virginia, in the same building where we're going to have the Bash in Beckley on June 17th coming up. Tickets available at the Raleigh County Convention Center. Stephen P. New and All Star Wrestling presenting the biggest West Virginia card perhaps in history. But back then I was a 10 to 12-year-old wrestling fan, and I saw Chris Candido live, and it really did stick with me. And I didn't get to watch a whole lot of ECW. I didn't really know much about that Impact run. I knew it happened, but I didn't know it was like basically the cause of his death. He was so anxious to get back on TV, and he was embarrassed by having broke his ankle in that match. They stopped the match, and he was embarrassed by that. This guy was a wrestler in his soul. And he did those miles. He did whatever it took to get recognized. And as a small athlete, just like we heard Conan say about Rey Mysterio, it must have been so hard for Rey to get booked. And it had to be hard for Candido to get booked. He was willing to move to Knoxville to be on Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I do think that hopefully my best ambition was that more people would find out about Chris, more people would reach out, would research him and find out some of the cool stuff that some of us already knew about Candido. And it was said in there, and you can say this about a few different people, but Chris paved a path in professional wrestling that many people travel today. That small guy, high impact, high flying, yet powerful, work rate. Plus he had the knack for the gaga. And one of my favorite moments was his mom saying, "Oh, well, in ECW, they put the baby bonnet on him."
That was Smoky Mountain. Or
the Smoky Mountain. Yeah. They had to put the baby bonnet on him, but he was willing to do whatever it took to get over. Nobody wants to wear a baby bonnet, but he knew it was going to get a reaction. And that's what he wanted. That's what he knew he was going to get out of it. And so I hope that everybody's going to come away with this. I mean, Tammy's reputation was what it was before and hasn't improved from this. I hope Chris's will only improve and that there'll be deeper admiration for the work he put in and the path he paved for professional wrestling. What is happening on AEW today is in part due to Chris Candido.
You're absolutely right. As Steve Classic, my wise old father, used to say, nothing can ruin a good man like a bad woman. And that was really what you saw on that episode. And if Chris Candido was alive right now, he would probably be backstage agenting.
At one of the major companies, no question about it.
Right.
I think, Steve, you hit on it. One of the things that made me so depressed is like, wow, he's me. I made belts when I was a kid.
Definitely.
I just didn't have the physical attributes or the balls to pursue it. And
dude, I still have a hand-drawn cover of the WWF magazine that I made myself. I drew it and I typed it up on my sister's word processor. And so when I saw those photos that he drew as a child, and that's one of the things they used on Instagram to promote the show, I thought, man, he was a true wrestling fan. Like, this guy wanted nothing else.
And I loved that his brother preserved that room. There was all of Chris's posters.
Beautiful.
And Chris's hand-drawn art. And I just thought, somebody that's like his childhood room, and keep that way, because that means something.
And how heartbreaking for his family, but yet for us, we think that's so cool, and they have a different feeling every time they walk in that room. They probably don't do it that often.
Yeah.
Right. Because it just reminds you that he's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As if another thing that episode, y'all are kind of changing my mind about this episode as I talk to y'all about it. Another thing about that episode was, and if it wasn't like we needed another example, but it's just another situation where Jim Cornette has proven to be the greatest talent scout in the history of this business. And I know there's a lot of Jim Cornette haters out there, and that's fine. And I understand where some of you are coming. I can be honest about that. I call him the God Emperor because I think he has the greatest mind, and he's one of the most entertaining pieces of content in my week is, Jim's clips on YouTube. But it just proves that from Kevin Owens now and Tyler Black, all the way back, and Sami Zayn, and we could be here all day, but all the way back to someone who wasn't even interested in being in the business. And of course, Sunny, her tail turned sideways, but there for a while she was the biggest female in the business back in the
No
AOL
question.
days. She was once or two times the most downloaded woman on the planet. Now, look, there's 1,000,010s running around in this world, but there was only one Sunny, and man, she had attitude. She was, and Jim saw that out of a 19-year-old. And that's another thing that was kind of a bummer too. And my wife was like, wait, she was in med school?
Yeah,
Because she
was
knows the
pre-med
story. She was in
at
pre-med.
University of Tennessee.
And then, she ends up to, what happened a few, however long ago that was. I don't even want to talk about it because it makes me feel bad.
It's
but
kind of like all she ever did, and it's all she knew how to do after that.
Yeah.
I think that's it. And that's another thing about the wrestling business. If its calls get in deep enough, some people are stuck with it, for life, and will struggle to do anything else.
Yep. But I think it just showed that Stephen P. New's most famous client knows this business better than anyone that's living, besides maybe Vince McMahon. But I think he probably knows it better than Vince McMahon.
I think he and Paul Heyman, one's the Yankee version, and the other's the Southern version. They're two sides of the same coin in terms of loving it, getting involved early, being around it early, and then just from that and drawing on those great minds, turning into great minds themselves. But to talk more about my friend and my client, Jim Cornette, he's their go-to. Think of all those episodes that Adam was reading to us before we started recording here. Cornette is a legitimate pro wrestling historian. They go to Louisville to Castle Cornette to film him because he ain't leaving, but they go there to film him. They have access to his archives that they need for some of the stories and the historical verification. And it's amazing just what he knows, what he's able to contribute over such a span of time. He started out as a photographer for Memphis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then breaks into the business in Memphis, goes to Georgia for a cup of coffee in about 1983, and then to Mid-South, World Class for a period of time, and then to Crockett, where, they, in both Mid-South Wrestling and in Crockett, they printed money with the Rock and Roll Express. They redefined tag team wrestling in the 80s. And then Corny starts his own company that runs for 4 years or whatever. And then he's so well liked by Vince McMahon, and he's Smoky Mountain serving as a feeder system for the WWF. And the same thing with OVW. McMahon likes him so much. He's like, go back home to Louisville, but train Brock Lesnar, John Cena,
Randy
Dave
Orton.
Batista, Randy Orton.
Shelton Benjamin.
Just generations, the institutional knowledge that he and Paul Heyman, have probably deserves to be in some museum somewhere.
Yeah,
and man, I love him so much. I grew up hating him as a child, watching 605, and then really getting on to his podcast back when Alice was the co-host. If you remember that far back,
I remember Alice.
And he's almost like a member of my family. My wife had never seen him before, but she'd heard hundreds of hours. And when she saw him for the first time on Dark Side of the Ring, she's like, I didn't think that's what he was going to look like. She never knew that, what he looked like. And when he broke down, that's when I was like, God damn, like this guy is one of the hardest motherfuckers who, comes off as so stoic isn't the right word because he's not stoic, but he's not a sincere.
Not a lot rattles.
A lot of sincere. He doesn't come through off like earnest sincerity a lot because he's bitching about a lot of things. And when he broke down, and the other one, oh God, when he talked about, they called him when Brian Pillman died, and he just said, "That's not a thing I want to hear." That I can't even talk about it now.
Right.
And what I'm worried about.
Look at the way Dr. Tom was one of the first guys that got the call and I can't remember who he said called him and said Chris is dead.
Mm.
And Dr. Thomas went all to pieces thinking about it. I mean, you know, we interviewed Dr. Tom a couple years ago down at WrestleCade, and you know, tough as nails. If you've ever talked to Tom Pritchard, tough guy, and he was on this episode talking about being Zip Body Donna.
That he hated.
He hated it.
They did not do enough concentrating on how he cut his hair. Like they didn't do enough of him showing him his blonde, those locks. You know, I mean, that might have distracted from the story, but there was not enough said about Dr. Tom's hair.
Right. But man, at that point where he's talking about getting the call saying Chris is dead, he was shaken by having gotten that phone call.
And there's so many of those moments over this series. You talk about the Von Erichs, you talk about Benoit, you talk about Canyon. There are, and then again, you know, I have said on here, and will say it till the day I die, that Ric Flair is my favorite wrestler of all time. I think he's the greatest wrestler of all time. But man, I didn't really want to hear about his actions on the plane ride from hell.
The plane ride from hell might be the worst offender overall, as far as just like, there's no redeeming qualities about that. JR looks like an asshole. Vince looks like an asshole. Razor Ramon looks like an asshole. Ric Flair looks like a huge asshole.
And Dustin Rhodes ends up looking like I mean, he and Terry were divorcing right then, and he's drunk in the back of the plane. And here's the thing: what bothered me so badly about that episode in particular was the inaccuracy, and I don't remember whose inaccuracy it was about who was sitting where and who was observing what was going on. Because after that, I think there had to be a lot of retractions, and there was a lot of corrections to, you know, some of the factual recitations
after the episode came out.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah,
I
guess I didn't realize
even
that.
Jim Ross said that broke Jim Ross for participating in Dark Side of the Ring, and he said he wasn't going to participate in it anymore, which is why I think I'm free to say that Tammy wanted control or a lot more input into this episode than they were willing to give her, which is why you didn't see any up-to-date interviews with her. They used a lot of shoot video footage and audio footage and things like that. But that's why it was a 1 hour episode, and, you know, with nothing much up to date, or it was more a Chris Candido focused episode. But man, the plane ride from hell was just, nobody came away from that.
Wait, you're wrong.
I know what you're wrong. To say. There was one white horse shining
my brother
armor.
In cosmic consciousness, RVD, the man.
He seemed to be the only one that was like, this is messed up, you guys.
The man who got fired because he smoked a plant was the one guy on that fucking flight that was like, hey guys, you're all acting like fucking animals. And this is not right. So there was one shining beacon of light, and it was the whole effing show. And that was probably the best part of the show. Because, you know, RVD, let's be honest, he's the weed guy, right? So we think about he's the weed wrestler. But the weed wrestler was the only one who had any moral compass on that fucking flight.
Right. Is that also the flight or was it a different one where they cut Michael Hayes?
That's it. That's the one. That's the one.
They cut Michael Hayes' hair.
Talk about making it seem like a stupid fraternity of silly, immature, meathead guys. You know,
who are sex pests.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Cutting each other's eyebrows and wanting to wrestle in the middle of the aisle. You know, like, come on. I want to throw out, if I can, a question that may veer on the edge of billable hours for Steve. And so don't bill me, but, you know, for Dark Side of the Ring, you know, obviously they sought out Tammy for an interview, and they mentioned at the end, you know, that she declined to participate. is it because that stuff is public out there that they're able to use it?
Yes.
And it never did say, like, I'm sure at the end it credited it, but it never said like exactly what podcast it was. It said what year the interview had been conducted. But is it just for documentary purposes? You're allowed legally to
Fair use.
use that?
It's
fair use. And they didn't say it as it was going, but and I didn't watch the credits. Probably
there were several things in there. RF video was in there. You know, there were a couple. I didn't read them all, but you know, I did at least notice like the Rob Feinstein interviews were in there.
Right. So, and you know, and that's probably where that's from. And you know, when a talent agrees to do that, you know, a shoot video with RF video or whomever, the maker of that owns that content, and that person agrees. It's usually work for hire. And they agree, you know, that belongs to whatever video company shooting that in perpetuity. So that's how, if RF Video then licenses that device, boom.
So that's all the approval you need is for somebody to say, "Yep, you can exert this for the."
I'm sure there were some ducats. There were some ducats that flowed one way for a lot of those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you own something, I know for a fact that when you upload to YouTube an original piece of content, it is yours. It is owned.
Right.
The algorithm sees it as yours. So I want to wrap this up, and this is my last statement to the jury, because actually talking to you guys have made me change my opinion a little bit. So I want to end it with this. I have said now for the whole time we've had this podcast. Also, if you like what we're doing, please give us a like, comment, and share. Tell your friends about us. We're trying to build something around here. But I have said on other occasions that I am afraid that we are like 5 to 10 years away from like wrestling going away. Look, guys, when we go to shows, there's not a lot of kids. There are kids, I understand. But it's not like when we were kids, Steve. When we were kids going to the bash at the same bash, we were like half the crowd. I do believe that if something doesn't happen, that wrestling is going to just decline. And here's what I think about with Dark Side of the Ring. You all have made excellent cases for why this is excellent television. I wanted to say that probably first. I should have said that before I kind of tried to bury the whole thing, the whole concept. It is excellent. It is excellently made. It is quality.
Very well done. Yeah.
But, and I asked my wife, and you know, she's my metric for this. I said, did any of this make you want to watch wrestling? Like, Steve, I'm going to go to you first because comic book, you're the fellow comic book nerd. I asked this to my students who come in with Iron Man shirts on and Punisher shirts on. And I asked them, did watching the movie make you want to go read the comics? And it's about 50-50. It's about 50-50. I thought it would be more, but it's not. Do you think that this is a net negative in making fans, or is that not really an issue anyway?
I don't think it's an issue anyway, and let me tell you the reason why. We're getting ready here in Beckley to start the 63rd season of Theater West Virginia. My daughter is an aspiring Broadway actress, and after she gets back from Europe in a couple of weeks, she'll be back out on the stage out there at Grandview in National Park. That being said, we are feeling the competition for the entertainment dollar right now. And if Bruce Springsteen only knew that there was a whole lot more than 57 channels and nothing on, to quote a great 80s song, man, there are gazillion channels on and nothing on. Streaming out the wazoo. You can watch every show that has ever been on, every movie that has ever been on with YouTube or what have you. And there's always going to be competition for content, Steve. So wrestling will be out there, but whether a Dark Side of the Ring causes somebody to go back and watch or rewatch Jimmy Snuka matches, Chris Benoit matches, Grizzly Smith, Jake the Snake Roberts matches, or anything like that. You know, I don't know at this point. What I know is that channels like Vice need content. And if you're looking for content that always seems to draw viewers, you know, pro wrestling is always going to scratch that itch. Now,
We're loyal viewers, that's for sure.
we are
right?
loyal viewers. Now, Dark Side's got a little bit of that nostalgia to it. It just does. Same as with A&E. Man, there's a ton of wrestling content on the network that was started in the 90s as arts and entertainment. You used to watch operas on Sunday night on A&E. Now you watch WWE Hidden Treasures or whatever it is. So
and that kind of goes to my point, Steve, is the biographies that A&E does them. Now, I know they're surface level. That's the thing about the Dark Side of the Ring is they go deep into the epidural layers to get the stories. But when I watch the A&E biographies, like, I feel good. I feel like, wow, that's awesome. Like, I'm not even a Goldberg fan, but I
unless you know a little bit better and know how much revisionist history you just watched. But yes, they make you feel good. They make you feel good.
Maybe I'm denying that part of me because I know, like, it's
easy to deny. You just say, whatever.
They did a whole Shawn Michaels episode and didn't interview Marty Jannetty, and we all know why. But they didn't interview Marty Jannetty. Now you best damn for sure know that if Vice was doing a Shawn Michaels, they're going to have a 2-day interview with Marty Jannetty.
Yeah,
sure.
And so, Marty Jannetty on an episode of this season, by the way, of Dark Side of the Ring.
No.
One of the most anticipated, I might say.
Right. And I just hope that there might be somebody out there who doesn't think they're a wrestling fan who would watch one of these episodes and go, wow, I'm going to go back and watch that stuff and then maybe say, hey, what's out there right now? And find WWE on Monday night or Friday night or one of the multiple AEW shows or, whatever scratches their itch, whatever they find that they like in terms of pro wrestling. But I have to try to stay like Adam Harris and stay positive and optimistic that the best days of pro wrestling are in front of us instead of behind us.
Like the Iron Sheik. Positive.
Sheik positive.
Trying to stay positive in the face of a Grizzly, what's his last name? Grizzly
Adams. A world that we
Grizzly Smith episode.
So Adam wrap us up. Grizzly Adams. No, I'm sorry. I was thinking about Vince McMahon's mustache.
TV show on NBC with the man.
The Bear's name was Ben. The Bear's name was Ben in Grizzly Adams. Adam, wrap us up. Do you think that it could turn off potential fans of wrestling? And let's be honest, we need more.
Well, we do need more. But I don't think there's any sense in trying that hard anymore. And I'm going to try to make a point that I think my comic book colleagues will be able to understand. And Steve, help me out with this a little bit. But just today, first of all, I wanted to say we didn't see Paul Heyman in this. And somebody in the chat said, why wasn't Paul Heyman a part of this? I know why he wasn't a part of it. And it has more to A, probably because he just didn't want to do it. B, he would have had to try to justify that Maury Povich interview he did with Tammy on ECW. I had never seen that before. I didn't know it existed.
I did.
Gross. Yep. Gross.
Disgusting.
Bad.
He would also have had to have tried to have justified having Chris and Tammy max out their personal credit cards, making travel arrangements for ECW's wrestlers in their last days, and then Chris and Tammy trying to reach Paul to get reimbursement, and he wouldn't take their phone calls, despite getting money from McMahon at the time.
Yeah.
Before you go, Adam, you're kind of proving my point.
Yeah.
Paul Heyman has made us very happy over the last 5 or 6 years. And now I have to think about this guy's also a fucking schemer dirtbag back in his day. Maybe now he's not.
Well,
you know what I mean?
He owes Tammy a bunch of money. Now,
he owes
probably a lot of other people.
Not to bring
has run on it, but if he were we started this talking about morals and scruples and things like that. He's making nice bank with WWE right now. It's only a moral obligation at this point.
I'll pull back the curtain on the House of Kayfabe at WrestleCade last year. I was at a fantastic dinner financed by Stephen P. New, and I got to sit beside what has now become one of my really good friends, Francine, and we get to reconnect every year at WrestleCade now. And she gave us a number, and I don't want to say it out loud, but she gave us a significant number that Paul Heyman still owed her. She has no reason to lie about it. There's no reason to lie, right?
And she didn't say it maliciously or like that she hated Heyman or anything like it. It was she gave that large number to Steve Barker in a very matter of fact manner.
Very. So Adam, wrap us up here.
All right. I'm going to try to do this just for my fellow comic geek, Stephen P. New. And I'm not really back into comics, but today I like to just go browse the comic store called The Boardroom. And just because I love observing the artwork of modern comics. And I picked up this She-Hulk, man. She's awesome. I have a thing for She-Hulk. I think she's one of the coolest characters. And Steve, the early She-Hulk stuff, like, was it one of the first comics to kind of wink at the viewer, almost to break that third wall, right? Like
her and Deadpool.
She would address the reader, and on the cover it would say like, "Hey guys, your last chance. You better buy this or else," right? So I read this today, and on the first page, there's like a self-referential thing that I'm not going to get, but I know enough about comics. She says, "Oh, so you're just giving him the Rogue Gambit treatment, huh?" Like, that's a pretty deep reference. That a casual reader is not going to be able to do that. And so when a casual viewer tunes into AEW and sees four guys give four self-referential moves to the guys that they admired over there, they're not getting that. And because of that, I don't think wrestling is trying to get new fans, just like obviously comics have realized, like, guys, we're just going for this same target audience, the deep lovers, the ones who understand it the most, and we're going to target this product for our true fans. There's no more trying to bring in the casual wrestling viewer, or there's very little odds of it. And I think that's what gives us AEW. I think that's what gives us Dark Side of the Ring, and I think that they're aiming right at us, those who have an insatiable thirst for this stuff, and they know we're going to watch it, and they're going to find every little bit that they can that we may not know. And there's a broad spectrum of wrestling fans, right? We're probably the geekiest of all. And if you've watched this video so thus far, you're welcome to the club, because you're one of the geekiest of all too. Mark. And thanks for watching, by the way. All marks welcome in the House of Kayfabe. That's where I'm at. Is I don't think the wrestling world is going to attract any new fans. Maybe some here and there, but I think they already are referencing every material that they can to just try to maintain and satiate our thirst as the lifelong wrestling fans.
Well, marketing experts call it being sticky. Like, a fan base is sticky.
Okay.
Like Tom Cruise is a sticky superstar. If he's in a movie, people's going to go watch it. Ryan Reynolds is sticky. Wrestling fans are the stickiest of fans, and we'll keep watching them.
I know Star Wars fans are pretty close.
Yeah, especially if you went through episode 9, you were really sticky, because that fucking movie was terrible.
Or you went to see Fast 10 because because John Cena was in it.
Same thing.
That's
same
us.
Thing.
That's us.
Same thing. So I went into this thinking and feeling bad about it, about especially the last episode, and getting to talk to you all. I think you've changed my mind a little bit, which I think is what this content is for, and what wrestling does. It brings us together. That's what the great archetypal stories that have lasted for millions of years, they bring us together. That's something about the Dark Side of the Ring. I'm right now working with a guy who is a casual fan and hasn't watched the product since the Attitude Era, but he watched all of the Dark Side of the Ring episodes. This is a guy that was a mark and is out, but he still went back and watched those. Right. So I guess maybe that's a good thing.
That is a good thing for lapsed viewers. Definitely. You're right. If they hear of something, there's an episode on the Road Warriors. I love the Road Warriors and the Ultimate Warrior, like, they've definitely done that. That's a good point. It may do more than we think, as far as bringing back some of the lapsed viewers, or at least reminding people that they used to love wrestling.
It's true. And, when wrestling's good, wrestling is the best. Thank you all for watching. You all. I'm for Adam Harris and for Stephen P. New Esquire. I am the other Steve, and we will see you all next time.